So today we are going to study the female reproductive system of the chapter Human Reproduction from class 12th Biology. We have already studied about the male reproductive system and its structures. Now in female reproductive systems there are primary sex organs, which is given here, and we have accessory ducts, same as in case of male reproductive system. So in primary sex organ in females we have a pair of ovaries. And the others, like pair of oviduct, uterus, cervix and vagina, are all the accessory ducts. Now if we talk about the structure of the ovaries, they are actually hanging in the abdominal wall. As you can see here, these are the ovaries. They actually hang in the abdominal wall and are present in the lower pelvic region. They are attached to the abdomen with the help of tissue that is called mesovarium. You can see here the ovarian ligament. This is known as mesovarium. Okay. Now after ovaries, the next structure is pair of oviducts, or it is also called as fallopian tube. I can write here pair of oviduct. It is present one on the left and other on the right. The first part is broad region known as infundibulum, which is also called as funnel of oviduct. Infundibulum. So this is our infundibulum. And after that, a finger-like structure present known as fimbriae. So here a finger-like structure is present. You can see it clearly in this diagram. This is known as fimbriae. These finger-like structures are known as fimbriae. So when we look close to the structure of fimbriae, it is like this. Yes, this is not a flower, but the structure of fimbriae, and the opening is known as ostia. Now we have a very important function of this opening ostia. What happens? When secondary oocyte comes from ovary, it gets entry into the infundibulum from ostia only. Now secondary oocyte is going to the next region, which is wider region, and this wider region is known as ampulla. Where this turn is present, this region is known as ampulla, present on both of the sides. After that, after the ampulla region, we have a narrow path which is called isthmus. So this is our isthmus. This is also present on both of the sides. Now on both of the sides, isthmus will open into a common duct, and this common duct is a single duct and it is known as uterus. You can see here. And this uterus is also known as womb and hysteria. Sorry, it's hystera. We have divided uterus into three parts. The first one is where both the fallopian tubes open. This is known as our fundus. This is our fundus part. Now from fundus, the major part of the uterus is known as body. This all is the uterus body. Now after that, narrow part comes, which is known as cervix. After the cervix, we have vagina. Now if we talk about, let's talk about the structure of the ovary. These are of almond shapes. You can see here that they are of almond shapes, right? They are lined by germinal epithelium. This layer is known as germinal epithelium. Okay. And they are made up of cuboidal cells. So now inside the germinal epithelium we have another layer which is known as tunica albuginea. What it is known as? It is known as tunica albuginea. Okay. Now if we talk about what is inside the tunica albuginea, the whole thing, everything inside the tunica albuginea is known as stroma. Okay. Again, stroma is also divided in two parts. One is outer part, which is our outer cortical region, and other is internal medullary region. Okay, so it is divided into these two parts. Outer cortical region is known as our cortex part, and internal medullary region is known as our medulla. If we talk about them separately, the cortical region, follicles are present in this region. You can see the primary follicle, the secondary follicle, tertiary and Graafian follicles. So what happens? Primary follicles convert into secondary follicles, and secondary follicles will convert into tertiary follicles, and then at the last it will convert into Graafian follicles. So these are all present in our cortical region. Now if we talk about the medullary region, many blood vessels are present inside it. You can see the blood vessels. Elastic tissues are present, elastic fibers are present, and smooth muscles are present in this region. As we already talked about the follicles in the outer cortical region, let's study it in deep, and let's study the process, a process of folliculogenesis. And this is a very important process. Let's move on to the next slide. So inside the follicle, what is present? Inside the follicle, oocyte is present, right? First type of follicle is our primary follicle. So this is our primary follicle, and inside it we have primary oocyte. So this is nothing but our primary oocyte, right? Now primary follicle is our primary oocyte, which is surrounded by granulosa cells. So these our granulosa cells are present in primary follicle. These primary follicles start forming inside the female even before her birth. That is, they are present in the embryonic stage of the female, right? This is very important to remember. Now secondary follicle is only primary oocyte. In secondary follicle nothing changes, right? Nothing changes in the oocyte. This is only our primary oocyte. So what is the difference between primary follicle and secondary follicle? So secondary follicle, the difference is that one more layer of theca cells is present in it. So this is our layer of theca cells. Okay, that's how it is grows. It grows from the primary follicle and becomes secondary follicle. Now secondary follicle will grow, and next follicle formed is our tertiary follicle. So this is the process of tertiary follicle, which gets mature again to form Graafian follicle at the end. But let's talk about the tertiary follicle first. So in tertiary follicle, primary oocyte will form secondary oocyte. So here we can see that this is not the primary oocyte. This is our secondary oocyte, because it is also mature to form secondary oocyte, and this happens by the process of meiosis. So primary oocyte did meiosis and formed secondary oocyte, right? Now cavity is formed over secondary oocyte. A cavity is formed which is known as antrum. So this cavity is antrum, it is written here, and other things will remain same as of secondary follicle, right? Sometimes students get confused and think that there might be secondary oocyte in further stages of follicles, but it is not true. We have only primary follicles, primary oocytes and secondary oocytes. Okay. So there is no tertiary oocyte, there is no concept of tertiary oocyte. So this is our tertiary follicle. Now come to the point that how theca cells are arranged in tertiary follicle. So these are divided into two layers. Inner is theca interna, which is cellular, and outer is theca externa, which is fibrous, right? Now antrum consists of fluid, that this cavity consists of fluid which is known as liquor folliculi. What it is called? Liquor folliculi. Right. Cells between secondary oocyte and theca layer are granulosa cells, which are binding secondary oocyte to theca and are known as cumulus oophorus. So this is known as cumulus oophorus. Right. In tertiary follicle, secondary oocyte also forms a covering of glycoprotein over it, and this membrane is known as zona pellucida. You can see here, this is known as zona pellucida. This is situated here just over the secondary oocyte. Right. Now this tertiary follicle will mature to form Graafian follicle. You can see in the next slide here. This is our Graafian follicle. This is our tertiary follicle. In ovaries, every month, one of the oocyte is getting matured in one of the ovary. Now the Graafian follicle is ruptured. You can see here it gets ruptured and secondary oocyte comes out. It is secondary oocyte, not the egg. Right? This is secondary oocyte. Okay. And this process of secondary oocyte coming out, or we can say rupture of Graafian follicle, is known as ovulation. So ovulation is rupture of Graafian follicle and secondary oocyte released from it after that. You must remember that secondary oocyte is released from the Graafian follicle and not the egg or ovum that is released, because it is very much confused by the students. So you must remember that it is secondary oocyte that gets released just after the rupture of the Graafian follicle. Now this ruptured Graafian follicle will form corpus luteum. You can see here. And again, this corpus luteum is a endocrine structure. This is our endocrine structure, right? This is also called as yellow body. The corpus luteum is yellow, that's why it is called as yellow body. Now this yellow body is further going to regress to form corpus albicans. It gets degenerate and form corpus albicans. Now because this corpus albicans is white in color, it is known as white body. Right? So as ovaries release secondary oocyte in one place, and which shows it is exocrine gland. So what is ovary according to release of secondary oocyte? It is exocrine gland. Okay, but we can also observe that it forms corpus luteum, which is an endocrine gland. Right? What it is? Endocrine gland. Okay, and this corpus luteum releases estrogen as well as progesterone. Hence here it is working as endocrine gland. So if ovary is doing both of the works of exocrine gland and endocrine gland, so it is our heterocrine gland. What it is called? Heterocrine gland. So thank you for watching this video. In the next video we will cover more structures in detail of the female reproductive system.